When you think of the best dunkers in today's NBA, names like Ja Morant, Zion Williamson, Anthony Edwards, Zach LaVine, and LeBron James probably come to mind. These guys deliver jaw-dropping dunks, posterizing defenders, soaring over big men, and making highlight reels every night. But what if I told you that back in the 2000s, there was a player who didn't just dunk, he turned every game into his own personal dunk contest? That player was Vince Carter, and no one in NBA history put on an in-game dunking display quite like he did. From his iconic throwdown over Alonzo Mourning to the double pump reverse against the Pacers, Carter made impossible dunks look effortless. But nothing compares to what might be the greatest dunk of all time, when he jumped over 7'2" Frederick Weiss during the 2000 Olympics, leaving the world in absolute shock. He wasn't just a dunker, he was a showman, a human highlight reel, and a player who redefined what was possible above the rim. This is the story of how Vince Carter shocked the league and made every game feel like a dunk contest. Long before he was posterizing legends and electrifying arenas, Vince Carter's journey to dunking greatness began in Daytona Beach, Florida. But surprisingly, basketball wasn't his first love. Music was. Carter was an exceptional drummer, so talented that he could have pursued music professionally. But once he hit the court, it was clear that basketball was his true calling. Growing up, he became obsessed with the art of dunking, watching legends like Julius Erving, Dominique Wilkins, and Michael Jordan dominate the rim. He studied their jump mechanics, mimicked their styles, and spent hours on playground courts, challenging himself to jump higher and dunk harder. By the time he reached Mainland High School, Carter had already built a reputation, not just as a dunker, but as a player who could do things no one else could. His high school games became must-watch events, as fans packed the gym to see the kid who could soar above the rim. His windmills, tomahawks, and reverse slams were already NBA level, and scouts quickly realized he was special. Then came North Carolina, where Carter took his dunking to another level. Under the legendary Dean Smith, he refined his game. But one thing never changed: his ability to electrify the crowd with jaw-dropping slams. Teammates recall how even future NBA players would stop mid-practice just to watch him dunk. Opponents could do nothing but shake their heads as he effortlessly threw down 360s and reverse slams over defenders. The NBA took notice. In the 1998 NBA draft, Vince Carter was selected by the Golden State Warriors, but was immediately traded to the Toronto Raptors in exchange for his college teammate Antoine Jamison. That's when the world finally got to witness what Vince Carter was truly capable of. The moment Vince Carter stepped onto an NBA court, it was clear. This was different. His rookie season was one big highlight reel filled with dunks that instantly made him a fan favorite. One of his first welcome to the NBA moments came against the Indiana Pacers when he caught a high lob and threw down a violent one-handed alley-oop, making defenders look helpless. His ability to float in the air and finish with power was unlike anything Toronto had ever seen. Just when fans had thought they had seen it all, Carter delivered another jaw-dropping moment. This time, against the Houston Rockets, a two-handed 360 jam that left the crowd in disbelief.
360 whirl-around dunk. Now that wasn't necessary.
Vince Carter's dunks were effortless in execution, yet powerful enough to rattle the entire backboard, something you rarely see from a guard. The message was loud and clear. Vince Carter wasn't just here to play, he was here to dominate. Every game, Carter did something no one had ever seen before. He was doing windmills in traffic, 360s in transition, and putting defenders on posters nightly. Toronto had never had a player like this before. The city was falling in love with basketball, and it was all because of Vince Carter. By his second NBA season, Vince Carter had already built a reputation as one of the most electrifying in-game dunkers in the NBA. But on February 12, 2000, during All-Star Weekend in Oakland, California, he stepped onto the court for the NBA Slam Dunk Contest, and what happened next changed the course of basketball history. At the time, the dunk contest was in desperate need of a revival. After the golden era of Michael Jordan, Dominique Wilkins, and Clyde Drexler, the competition had lost its shine. The 1997 contest had been so uninspiring that the NBA canceled it altogether in 1998, and the 1999 season was locked out. Many believed the contest was dead, until Vince Carter brought it back to life, in the most spectacular way possible, The NBA hoped that a young, high-flying cast, led by Vince Carter, Tracy McGrady, and Steve Francis, could breathe new life into the slam dunk contest. But truthfully, no one knew what to expect. Nonetheless, the energy shifted the moment Vince Carter stepped onto the court. The crowd was buzzing, and you could feel something special in the air. Wearing his classic purple Raptors jersey, he bounced the ball and took a deep breath. Then, he exploded off the ground, spinning a perfect reverse 360 windmill with such speed, power, and grace that the entire arena erupted instantly.
With his first stop.
And then came the words that made the moment even more legendary.
Let's go home! Let's go home, ladies and gentlemen!
Even fellow NBA players were in complete shock. Shaquille O'Neal's jaw dropped as he grabbed his camcorder, trying to capture the madness. Kevin Garnett jumped out of his seat in disbelief. Carter didn't just dunk. He redefined what was humanly possible, and that was just the first dunk. With the crowd still buzzing, Carter walked toward the right baseline, adjusting his stance. He took a quick dribble, gathered himself, and then launched off the ground, unleashing another ferocious windmill, this time from the side of the basket. This dunk had less flash, but more power, showcasing Carter's ability to elevate from any angle and throw it down with authority. By now, the other contestants weren't just watching, they were witnessing history. At this point, everyone in the building knew the 2000 Slam Dunk Contest wasn't a competition anymore. It was a Vince Carter showcase. For his third dunk, Carter called over Tracy McGrady to assist him. T-Mac stood underneath the basket, bouncing the ball perfectly off the floor. Carter timed it perfectly, catching the ball mid-air, putting it through his legs, and throwing it down with a one-handed finish.
They're doing all this. They're doing all this. Oh, it did not. It's over!
The arena exploded. The crowd was going nuts. Even the judges left their seats in disbelief. And then, Vince Carter delivered the most iconic mic drop moment in dunk contest history. He raised both fingers in the air in celebration, striking a pose reminiscent of Usain Bolt, then turned to the camera, arms waving, and with an ice-cold expression, declared, "It's over," because in that moment it was. What made Carter's dominance even more unbelievable was the fact that he barely had time to prepare. Just days before, he suffered a hand injury that required stitches after a workout accident. To make things worse, his coach, Butch Carter, had a strict rule for the younger players. No dunking in practice. Break it and you'd either cough up $500 or, even worse, answer to veteran enforcer Charles Oakley. Yet despite all of this, Carter walked into the contest and put on the greatest dunking display of all time. For his first dunk in the final round, Carter stood near half court, took a few slow focused dribbles, and then attacked the rim like a rocket. He leaped, cocked the ball back with one hand, and slammed it through the hoop. But this wasn't just a dunk. Instead of dropping back down to the floor, Carter's entire forearm was inside the rim, hanging there like he had physically become a part of the basket. Nobody had ever seen anything like this before. For a brief moment, the crowd didn't even know how to react. There was a half second of stunned silence, like everyone was collectively trying to process what they had just seen. Shaq's eyes widened as he stared at the replay on the big screen. Steve Francis stood frozen, his mouth agape in sheer disbelief. Even the judges looked as if they wanted to throw their scorecards into the stands. To close the show, Carter walked toward the backcourt, took a deep breath, and locked eyes with the rim. The crowd roared, sensing that something unforgettable was about to unfold. It was his tribute to the original free throw line pioneer, Julius Erving. This dunk was a formality. The competition was over. The NBA had never seen anything like Vince Carter before. Vince Carter didn't just win the 2000 dunk contest, he resurrected it. The contest had been fading, but after Carter's performance, it was once again must-watch TV. Every dunker who came after him, Zach LaVine, Aaron Gordon, Gerald Green, Ja Morant, owes something to what Carter did that night. Even players who weren't in the contest felt the impact. Years later, LeBron James admitted that watching Carter's dunks in 2000 made him want to compete in the contest, though he never did. Carter's 2000 dunk contest was so legendary that he never had to do it again. At that moment, Vince Carter officially became the greatest dunker the NBA had ever seen. Years later, even Bleacher Report published an article claiming that Vince Carter had killed the dunk contest, because after a performance like that, what more was there left to do? Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, Carter's victory changed the game forever. Every dunk that was done in successive years paled in comparison to what we saw that night from the man known as half man, half amazing. These days, the slam dunk contest is just a shell of its former self. A far cry from the epic battles of the late 1980s, Carter set the bar so ridiculously high that recent competitors have resorted to all kinds of props and skits in an effort to impress the judges. Yesterday, Paul George wore a glow-in-the-dark jersey, while Chase Budinger embraced his inner Billy Hoyle in a nod to the movie White Men Can't Jump. A year ago, Blake Griffin jumped over a Kia Optima while being flanked by a gospel choir. Yet despite these theatrics, there is so much apathy surrounding the dunk contest that many are suggesting that the NBA eliminated it altogether. 12 years ago, there wasn't the need for any gimmicks. On February 12th, 2000, there was just a man, a ball, and a blatant disregard for the laws of gravity.
His first stop. Let's go home. Let's go home, ladies and gentlemen.
Winning the 2000 dunk contest was just the beginning. For most players, All-Star Weekend is a chance to showcase their hops for one night. But for Vince Carter, the dunk contest never stopped. While other stars saved their best dunks for highlight reels and warm-ups, Carter brought that same energy every single night, treating regular season games like he was still performing under the bright lights of All-Star Saturday. Defenders weren't obstacles. They were props in his personal dunk exhibition. And when Carter took flight, it didn't matter who was standing in his way. No shot blocker was safe. No rim was untouched. No crowd was silent. It wasn't just that Carter dunked, it was how he dunked. His in-game slams were more than just 2 points. They were jaw-dropping, demoralizing, arena-shaking moments that left teammates hyped, defenders embarrassed, and entire crowds on their feet. And if anyone still doubted whether his dunking dominance could translate to in-game action, they learned the hard way. One of the first moments that truly defined Vinsanity came early in his Raptors career. It was 1999, and Carter was already making a name for himself as the most exciting young player in the NBA. But against the Indiana Pacers, he unleashed a dunk so vicious that it sent shockwaves through Toronto. With the Raptors pushing the ball in transition, Carter cut toward the basket, leaped into the air, caught a lob pass, and threw down a one-handed alley-oop that nearly ripped the rim off the backboard. The power, the aggression, the sheer audacity of the dunk sent the crowd into chaos. For Raptors fans, this was the moment they realized they weren't just watching a star, they were witnessing a generational dunker. One of the most mind-bending, physics-defying dunks of Vince Carter's career came against the Los Angeles Clippers. A dunk so surreal that even in slow motion, it still doesn't seem possible. The Raptors were on a fast break after a steal, with Carter sprinting down the left wing. His teammate threw what looked like a routine lob pass, but it was off target and appeared to be behind him. Just as it seemed out of reach, Carter launched himself into the air. With one hand, he snatched the ball mid-flight, cocked it back, and hammered it through the rim with unreal force. The crowd reaction? Pure hysteria.
The fans got what they wanted.
Even opposing fans came to games expecting highlight reel dunks from Vince Carter. In one regular season matchup against the Atlanta Hawks, he did something no one had ever seen before. A windmill alley-oop dunk that would have easily scored a 50 in any dunk contest. It was so effortless, so explosive, that even the home crowd couldn't help but buzz with excitement. And here's something most fans don't know. Vince Carter is one of the few players in NBA history to dunk from the free throw line during an actual game. It happened against the New York Knicks. This wasn't a contest dunk without a dribble. He did it in the flow of live game action, which made it even more jaw-dropping. And the wildest part? That was just one of many contest-worthy dunks he pulled off during actual games. How about a one-handed 360 dunk? Yeah, he did that too. Carter pulled it off in a game against the Cleveland Cavaliers after stripping the ball and taking flight. Like only he could. These are just a few of the countless dunks that made up his highlight reel career. There are honestly too many to fit into one video. Do a quick YouTube search, and you'll find entire compilations dedicated solely to Vince Carter's best dunks. And you'll quickly see why he's in a league of his own. And when it comes to posterizing defenders, Vince didn't feast on bench warmers or role players. He made a habit of dunking on Hall of Fame shot blockers. Not just guys who were in the wrong place at the wrong time. These were elite rim protectors who actually tried to stop him and paid the price. One of his iconic posters came early in his Toronto days during a game against the Atlanta Hawks. Carter drove hard along the baseline, and standing between him and the rim was 7-footer Dikembe Mutombo, one of the most feared shot blockers in NBA history. For most players, challenging Mutombo at the rim was a death sentence, but Carter didn't flinch. He gathered himself, exploded off the ground, and threw down a violent one-handed slam right over Mutombo's outstretched arms, then stared him down with ice-cold confidence. It wasn't just a dunk, it was a statement. Vince Carter wasn't just trying to score, he was out to humiliate defenders and leave the crowd gasping for air. Another brutal poster came against yet another Hall of Fame defender, Ben Wallace. As Vince drove straight down the middle, he gathered himself and exploded off the ground, and with such force and elevation that Wallace, known for his elite shot blocking, didn't even have a chance. In my opinion, this dunk is wildly underrated. You don't see it featured often in his top dunk compilations, but make no mistake, it was every bit as impressive as his more famous slams. But perhaps Carter's most legendary NBA in-game poster came in 2005 against none other than Alonzo Mourning, a Hall of Famer and one of the fiercest, most respected defenders of his era. The play unfolded quickly. Off a broken play, Carter stole the ball, drove hard down the lane, and Mourning rotated over, ready to do what he had done his entire career, erase a dunk attempt with authority. But Vince saw him coming, and instead of adjusting or trying to sneak around him, he went straight at him. In one explosive motion, Carter elevated, twisted mid-air, and hammered home a vicious tomahawk right over Mourning's outstretched arms. The force sent Mourning staggering backward, powerless to stop what had just happened. The Heat crowd, normally deafening, were stunned. Mourning, the ultimate defensive enforcer, had just been baptized at the rim. It was the kind of dunk that made players across the league take notice. Because if Vince Carter could do that to Alonzo Mourning, then really, who was safe? The answer? Absolutely no one. There are dunks, and then there are moments that stop time. Moments where the game disappears, the crowd vanishes, and the only thing left is a player suspended in midair doing something so outrageous, so impossible, it becomes myth the second it happens. For Vince Carter, that moment came on September 25th, 2000, in an Olympic showdown between Team USA and France. The stage was global, the stakes were high, and what was about to happen would become the most iconic in-game dunk the world has ever seen. The play started innocently, a deflection near midcourt, with Carter picking up the loose ball. He had an open floor ahead of him, and did what he always did, accelerated like a jet, eyes locked on the rim. But then, a giant stepped into his path. Standing between Carter and the basket was Frédéric Weis, a 7-foot 2-inch French center, the 15th pick of the New York Knicks. Hyped as a skilled big man with huge potential, literally the biggest obstacle on the floor. Any other player might have pulled up or tried to go around him. But this was Vince Carter. Without breaking stride, 2 dribbles, he gathered, planted, and took off like a missile. And in a moment that still doesn't seem real, Carter didn't go through Weis. He didn't go around him. He jumped over him, clean, no contact, no push-off, just pure supernatural flight. Carter soared so high, he cleared Weis entirely, cocking the ball back for a powerful slam that shook the rim, the gym, and everyone who witnessed it. Weis turned around in disbelief, unaware he had just been immortalized in the most humiliating way possible. Even his teammates were stunned, the crowd gasped, but the reaction that told the story came from Kevin Garnett, witnessing the dunk up close, completely losing his mind. Did he just jump over a 7-footer? Yes, he did, and the world would never forget it. The craziest part? Vince Carter never even saw Weis.
Frédéric Weis was not my focus as far as dunking the basketball.
He was so locked in on the rim, so focused on the finish, that he didn't realize he had just leaped over a 7-foot 2-inch human being. From that day forward, the moment was known as Le Dunk de la Mort, the dunk of death. A dunk so savage, so absurd, that it effectively ended Weis's career before he even set foot in the NBA. This wasn't just the best dunk of the Olympics. It wasn't just Vince Carter's greatest dunk. It was the moment that immortalized him as the greatest in-game dunker of all time. This was, and still might be, the single greatest in-game dunk in the history of basketball. Because no one has ever done it since. And no one ever will. By the early 2000s, Vince Carter was already a global icon, a walking highlight reel known for doing the unthinkable above the rim, hence earning the nickname Air Canada. But what many forget is that his legacy wasn't built on dunks alone. Behind every soaring slam and rim-rattling poster was a player with one of the most well-rounded skill sets of his era. Carter's offensive game was far more versatile than casual fans give him credit for. As defenders collapsed into the paint to protect the rim, Carter evolved into a lethal perimeter shooter. His jump shot was smooth, high-arcing, and deadly under pressure. He finished his career with over 2,200 made three-pointers, placing him among the top 10 all-time at one point. Whether it was a catch-and-shoot or a contested pull-up in crunch time, Carter could knock it down with ease. Carter was also a legitimate scoring threat in the post, particularly against smaller guards. He could back defenders down with strength, jump over them using his otherworldly athleticism, or use his footwork to create space and finish with finesse or power. He understood spacing, angles, and when to attack, making him a true three-level scorer in his prime. Defensively, while Carter wasn't known as a stopper, he was more than capable on that end of the floor. His length, timing, and athleticism allowed him to contest shots, jump passing lanes, and even block shots at the rim. He averaged over a block per game for his first 3 seasons, a stat rarely associated with a perimeter player. But just as his game was evolving, so was the story of his career, especially in Toronto. Carter's departure from the Raptors was anything but smooth. Injuries, front office friction, and a perceived lack of effort during his final stretch with the team created tension with fans who once saw him as a hero. It was a messy and emotional exit, one that cast a shadow over his time in Canada, and earned him boos every time he returned.
North Carolina, 6'6" guard number 15, Vince Carter.
But Vince found redemption and a rebirth with the New Jersey Nets, who acquired him in a blockbuster trade in 2004. Paired with Jason Kidd and Richard Jefferson, Carter reminded the world that he was half man, half amazing. In New Jersey, he silenced the doubters, putting together some of the most complete seasons of his career. He was efficient, deadly in clutch moments, and still capable of highlight reel dunks. But more importantly, he showed that he could carry a team to the postseason. His time with the Nets helped reshape his narrative, from dunker to dynamic scorer, from rising star to franchise player. Unfortunately, Vince Carter wasn't able to push the Nets beyond the conference semifinals, and in 2009 he was traded to the Orlando Magic. The goal was clear: help Dwight Howard get over the hump by providing veteran leadership, secondary scoring, and shot creation. Carter had his moments in Orlando, none more memorable than when he dropped 48 points, including 34 in the second half, as the Magic stormed back from a 17-point deficit to beat the New Orleans Hornets. It was a vintage Vince performance, explosive, fearless, and clutch. The Magic made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals in 2010, but fell short against a loaded Boston Celtics squad. That season would mark the tail end of Carter's prime, as he transitioned into the next phase of his career. Following his stint in Orlando, Carter played for the Phoenix Suns, Dallas Mavericks, Memphis Grizzlies, Sacramento Kings, and Atlanta Hawks, playing into his 40s, long after most of his peers had retired. His longevity alone was remarkable. He became the first player in NBA history to play in 4 different decades, from the 1990s through the 2020s. In Dallas, Carter became a fan favorite for his clutch shooting off the bench, including his iconic game-winning corner 3 in the 2014 playoffs against the San Antonio Spurs, a moment that reminded fans he still had magic left in him. But make no mistake, he was far from washed. Even in his 40s, Carter would flash those trampoline-like legs, delivering the occasional emphatic dunk that sent crowds into a frenzy. He wasn't just a veteran warming the bench, he was part of the rotation, stepping up when called upon, and proving he still had scoring bursts left in the tank. One such moment came in 2016, when 40-year-old Vince dropped 20 points on the Denver Nuggets, becoming the first player since Michael Jordan to score 20 or more in a game at that age. That same season, on February 6th against the Spurs, he added another historic stat to his resume, recording 4 blocks in a single game, joining an elite group of 40-year-olds that included Karl Malone, Dikembe Mutombo, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and Robert Parrish. Carter was the only guard on that list, a testament to his longevity, defensive awareness, and yes, those springy legs that refused to give in. By the time he joined the Atlanta Hawks, Carter was in his 40s, yet still playing meaningful minutes, hitting threes, and providing leadership on a rebuilding team. Young stars like Trae Young openly credited Carter for his guidance and professionalism. And even then, he would still give fans flashes of vintage Vince. At 42 years old, he became the oldest player in NBA history to score at least 20 points in a game, reminding everyone that the fire was still there. That same season, he logged an incredible 45 minutes in a quadruple overtime battle against the Chicago Bulls, proving that age really is just a number. He closed out his legendary career with a fitting milestone, 25,000 career points.
25,000!
And that mark came, poetically, against the team that originally drafted him, the Toronto Raptors. Even more fitting, he scored it on a dunk, a perfect final flourish for the player who redefined what it meant to take flight. Carter returned to the Atlanta Hawks for a record-breaking 22nd season, where 4 of his teammates were born the same year he was drafted. A full-circle moment that highlighted his unprecedented longevity. Then in 2020, during the COVID-19 pandemic, Vince Carter officially announced his retirement at age 43, bringing an end to one of the most remarkable careers in NBA history. He finished his career third on the NBA's all-time games played list, with 1,523 appearances, surpassing Dirk Nowitzki and trailing only Robert Parrish and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. So, is Vince Carter the greatest dunker of all time? Ask any basketball fan and you'll get some debate. Ask any NBA player and the answer comes fast. Yes, not just because of how high he jumped, but because of how he made dunking feel like art. There was power, yes, but also style, creativity, grace, and swagger. He didn't just dunk to score, he dunked to shock, inspire, and perform. Hall of Famers and legends alike have called his 2000 dunk contest performance the best of all time. Jason Kidd once said, "There's dunking, and then there's Vince Carter." Tracy McGrady didn't want to participate in the 2000 dunk contest because he knew how creative he was, saying, "Why would I want to get into it knowing that Vince is gonna win? I see his dunks every day and how creative he is." But perhaps his greatest achievement isn't just what he did in the air. It's how many players he inspired to chase the skies. Zach LaVine, 2-time slam dunk contest winner, openly credits Carter's 2000 performance as the moment he fell in love with dunking. Aaron Gordon, whose dunk contest battles captivated a new generation, said, "Vince's style made him realize you could dunk with both power and elegance." Gerald Green, known for his freakish bounce, once paid tribute to Vince Carter by recreating his iconic windmill alley-oop dunk in a game. Ja Morant, one of the most explosive athletes in the league today, grew up watching Carter clips on YouTube, dreaming of soaring just like him. These aren't just players following in his footsteps, they're dunking in his shadow. But Carter's impact didn't stop when he hung up his sneakers. After 22 seasons, he made a seamless transition into broadcasting, bringing his knowledge, charisma, and perspective to a new role as an NBA analyst. Whether breaking down plays, mentoring rookies from the studio, or sharing behind-the-scenes stories, Vince Carter's voice is now helping to shape the next generation of fans.